Simply Cooking by MmmChef is brought to you in part by Orleans Physiotherapy, specializing in a wide range of physical rehabilitation services, including acupuncture, cupping, and more. Orleans Physiotherapy, keeping your family moving since 1990.
This program was recorded on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation.
My clients often call me the condiment queen. Stay tuned to find out why and what these sweeteners have to do with it. So many of us are trying to limit our consumption of processed sugars, as we should. But we love them and it's delicious. So I'm gonna show you some recipes today on how to switch out the processed sugar for some more nutrient-dense sweeteners in things that you're used to getting at the grocery store, all the condiments we love. Things like my famous Beetchup, which is my take on a beet ketchup, my mayo, a yummy salad dressing, a barbecue sauce, and even a sweet dessert sauce. I have some of my favorite sweeteners here in front of me, and I'm going to be using them today and also talking a little bit about them. Processed white sugar is delicious, but it really isn't that good for us. So I have some awesome alternatives here that really add a punch of nutrition to go along with that sweet flavor. Of course, everyone knows the classic maple syrup, especially as a Canadian. This is probably my #1/2 most used sweetener. Next to it, we have molasses, which is actually a byproduct of making sugar, and it's where all of the nutrition lives. So when they make that white sugar, they take out all the nutrition and it lives inside this molasses. Next to that, we have something called agave. Agave comes from Caribbean and warm climate countries, and it looks like a cactus almost, excuse me. And it is a yummy sweetener that kind of has a similar flavor to honey, but it's a little bit runnier. Then we have the classic honey, True Bee, my favorite kind. Dates, which are a whole food sweetener. They have lots of fiber, which is something that white sugar doesn't have that it's missing. Next to it, we have coconut sugar. And very at the end there, we have a liquid and a granulated version of stevia. Now, stevia is an artificial sweetener. However, out of all of the artificial sweeteners that we know, in my opinion, it's one of the best and cleanest ones. My dad is a diabetic, and I have many, many clients who try to watch their sugar intake. So stevia is one of the greatest alternatives for that type of eating compared to, let's say, like a Splenda or one of those not so nice other processed artificial sweeteners. So we are gonna start with my yummy salad dressing. Salad dressing is one of those things that is easy and super able to be creative on. I make a different salad dressing every time I make one. So I'm gonna start today with a shallot. We always like some onion or garlic flavor in our salad dressing. If you don't have fresh shallot or fresh garlic, you can use some powdered onion or powdered garlic or granulated onion, or you can leave it out altogether. My clients call me the condiment queen because I supposedly make the best condiments. And I make a lot of condiments, and sometimes I like to say that's actually the difference between a home cook and a trained chef, is knowing all of the different ins and outs of making the perfect sauces, dressings, and dips, all the emulsifiers and sweets and salties, and getting the perfect mixture together. You can usually tell when a real chef has made your dressing versus coming from a bottle or some regular cook at home. So I've got my chopped shallot in my jar. Now I'm gonna juice a couple lemons. Oh, that one doesn't even have that many seeds. It's beautiful. And of course, we want some sweetener. So all of the bottled salad dressings that you buy at the grocery store, they are delicious, but they usually contain sugar or maybe corn syrup or maybe some other not so healthy ingredients. I'm gonna show you how to get a yummy lemon vinaigrette style dressing that doesn't have any of that in it. And it's probably more delicious than what you can get at the grocery store, to be honest with you. All right, we've got the juice of 2 lemons going into the bottom of the jar with my shallots. We've got a little dollop of Dijon mustard. This is one of those things that sets a regular vinaigrette made by a regular person apart from a delicious, smooth, and emulsified dressing. An emulsifier like mustard or wasabi or something like that will always help to kind of hold your dressing together because water and oil don't mix, and water is kind of like lemon juice. So I like to always add a little tiny bit of apple cider vinegar. And why do I do that? There's actually some live probiotics in this apple cider vinegar. It's fermented and it's alive. And so this adds beneficial bacteria and also helps you to digest your food. And in here, I need to add a sweetener. My favorite sweetener to use for salad dressing is honey. So that's the one I'm gonna start with. And I don't wanna waste the honey that's on my comb, so I'm just gonna pop that in there. And actually, I forgot one ingredient, but I'm gonna grab that right now as I grab my beets that I have on the stove. Something I'm gonna make next is my famous Beetchup. It's my take on a ketchup that's made with beets instead of tomatoes. And I've got some beets that I've just cooked. I'm gonna grab that from the stove, and I'm also gonna grab my olive oil at the same time because I need that for my salad dressing. While that's there, I'm just gonna drain my beets and let them sit in the colander while I finish my salad dressing for you. I always like to do about equal parts oil to equal parts whether it's vinegar or the lemon juice or what have you. And this way you don't get too big of a punch. If it's not sweet enough for you when you try it, you can definitely add some more honey. Or if you were making this salad dressing, or if I was making this salad dressing for someone like my dad, I would use this liquid stevia instead of using the liquid honey. That looks about half and half. Get rid of that. Put the lid on. Give it an aggressive shake. And look at that. It looks kind of creamy, and the lemon juice, apple cider vinegar, and olive oil have kind of become one, and that's because of the mustard that we have in there. All right, so now my famous beet ketchup, my Beetchup. This is something that I created out of necessity. I had a client whose kid couldn't have tomatoes, and they love French fries and ketchup. Who doesn't love French fries and ketchup? But we had to find a way to make them be able to eat that favorite meal without having to use tomatoes. So I thought, what's red? Beets. Oh, that's a little bit too many to fit in my blender, so I'm gonna have to do this in 2 batches. So I've got some cooked beets. You can use cooked beets that you've cooked yourself. You can use canned beets that you've drained. You can use frozen beets that you can buy at the freezer section in your grocery store, or you can even use a jar of pickled beets. I have pickled beets here. If I was gonna use this jar, I wouldn't add any vinegar because there's already vinegar in there. But today I'm gonna be using the beets that I cooked on the stove, and so I am gonna add vinegar. Typical ketchup has flavors like onion powder and garlic, so I'm going to add a peeled garlic clove to my blender. I'm going to add a little squirt of mustard because I want this to emulsify nicely. I'm going to add that apple cider vinegar that I had earlier that I used in the dressing, and probably about 1/4 cup. Then my favorite sweetener to use for this is maple syrup. I'll put the recipe online for this so you guys can get the quantities at a later time. So all my ingredients are in here. I'm gonna get this on the blender and blend this on the break. And when we come back, I'm gonna add a little bit of salt just to season it up. And really, it's that simple.
This program is brought to you in part by Orleans Physiotherapy, providing treatments as well as education to promote healthy and active living. Orleans Physiotherapy, keeping your family moving since 1990.
I have my Beetchup here that I just blended. This is the consistency you're looking for. A little bit runnier than the ketchup that you buy at the grocery store, but still has the same feel and flavor. I'm just gonna set this aside for later, and I'm gonna get working on my sweet sauce as well as my take on a unique way to make mayo. So I was telling you about how I had to create Beetchup because I had some clients that don't eat nightshades, tomatoes in particular, and the same goes for my take on mayo. My take on mayo is actually an eggless mayo, and that's because I have a lot of clients who can't eat eggs. Eggs happens to be one of the highest allergens out there, but everyone loves mayo. What are you gonna do? So I actually discovered what is called aqua fava. And what is that? Well, that translates to bean liquid. And what it is, it's actually the liquid from a can of chickpeas that's been drained off. I made sure that the can of chickpeas that I bought was sodium free because we don't want any extra salt in our mayo, but this is what it looks like. So I drained the chickpeas, I put them in the fridge to make a salad with later, and this is what I'm gonna be using to replace the egg. It will actually whip up just like an egg white. You can use it to make meringue cookies, but I use it to make mayo. And I'm also going to be working on my date sauce. So I'm going to be making a sweet dessert date sauce with dates, and that's pretty much it. So, all right, first we'll start with the dates. I love date sauce because it's like a caramel salted sauce and you wouldn't even know that it's made with high fiber dates. And the trick to that is adding a tiny little bit of baking soda / baking powder. So these dates I bought, they're already pitted. They're kind of soft, but they're a little bit too hard to put into a blender. So I'm gonna add a little pinch of baking powder, maybe like a quarter of a teaspoon. And I've got 2 cups of dates here. And I'm gonna grab my hot water that I've got boiling on the stove already. And I'm going to pour this over top of my dates. And they're just gonna soak here for a little while. We want them to get nice and soft so that they're easy to blend later on when I make that. All right, and back to the mayo. Actually, I think I need to make the barbecue sauce first. Or does it matter? I don't think it matters. All right, so I have my chickpea liquid. I'm gonna put this in the bottom of my jar here. If you were using real eggs, this is where you would put the egg yolks. So you would separate your eggs and you would add 2 egg yolks into here, and then you would put your egg whites back in the fridge to use for some fried eggs or for a recipe for later on. Contrary to popular belief, mayo is actually made with the egg yolks and not the egg whites, even though the mayo somehow turns to be white. So along with this chickpea liquid, I'm gonna add a little tiny bit of mayo. I'm making mayo. A little tiny bit of Dijon. And earlier I told you how the Dijon emulsifies. So it does the same thing in here. So even if you are using eggs, you still need mustard. You can use yellow mustard, powdered mustard, Dijon mustard, any kind of mustard will work for you, even wasabi, and then you get wasabi mayo. I love garlic in my mayo, so I'm adding a full clove of garlic into the bottom there. And then it has to have a little bit of acid. So you can use lemon juice or white vinegar, and I'm using my go-to raw apple cider vinegar. All right, this is the tricky part. Let's hope it doesn't split. So I've got my blender in the bottom. You could do this in a regular blender, or you could do this with a whisk by hand, but I don't have enough time to do it with a whisk by hand here. So I'm drizzling this oil in, and I'm letting the oil kind of come to the top and get a nice little layer before I push start. And the whole point is to kind of get the oil almost about half as much of what is the chickpea liquid or your egg yolks, and then turn it on. I'm actually going to take this lid off. It's going to go much faster. All right, let's see. Okay. All right. How does this work? My immersion blender is not working. We might, oh! There we go. Slowly pull up and add more oil. It's working. It's working. Look at how thick that is getting. Look at that. And we have vegan mayo. Oh my goodness. I'm so happy that worked. I'm gonna set that to the side and I'm gonna get my stuff together to start making my barbecue sauce. And if we have time, I'll add a little something special to the mayo to show you a different flavored version. So I have a pot here that I'm gonna put on the stove. I've got all my ingredients ready for my favorite way to make barbecue sauce. You'll notice that some of these sauces actually have similar ingredients and similar ways to make them, except for the mayo, of course. And this one is no different. So the last one we made was Beetchup. It had beets and vinegar and Dijon and a sweetener. And this is kind of the same, but instead of beets, I'm using tomato paste because barbecue sauce is definitely made with tomatoes. I've done it before with pineapple, and I've done it before with beets, but classic barbecue sauce, tomato paste. I'm an Italian girl, so I always have a tube of tomato paste in my pantry. This one is a double concentrated. So if you're using a double concentrated tomato paste, you might want to add a little bit of water, which is what I'm going to do. Otherwise, just use a regular can of tomato paste that you get at the grocery store. And if you can't find that, you can also just use some blended up fresh tomatoes or just a can of crushed or diced tomatoes. But if you're going to use something like that, I do suggest that you actually blend it so that you can get a smooth texture. All right, so I put that whole tube in there. I'm gonna add some apple cider vinegar. It's one of my favorite things. And then my favorite sweetener to use for barbecue sauce is molasses. You can use brown sugar, coconut sugar, white sugar, but we're trying to stay away from that. You could use honey and make like a honey barbecue sauce, but my favorite is molasses. It gives it that nice dark brown color that everyone's used to, and it gives it a little bit more thickness and a really nice mouth feel. So that's why I like to use molasses. And wow, I can smell that. I wish you guys could smell that. Amazing. About equal parts molasses to apple cider vinegar. Oh, and we can't miss Dijon. I'm gonna get this on the stove on the break, add a little bit of water to it, and kind of get it all together to the consistency of a barbecue sauce. I'm gonna put this on the stove on really, really low, and I'm gonna let it simmer and get all the flavors melded together. I'm also gonna add a little bit of salt. And if you wanted more flavor, this would be the time that you would add maybe garlic powder or onion powder, but I like classic, so I'm just gonna leave it nice and plain. And we'll see you after the break. I took my barbecue sauce off the stove. It simmered for probably about 15 minutes. If you had used a can of tomatoes or not thick tomato paste, you would have needed to let yours simmer a little bit longer, but because my tomato paste was really thick, I didn't need to. Look at that beautiful color. I can smell the molasses. Yum, yum. All right, that's a little bit too hot to put the lid on, so I'm just gonna set that to the side and give that a nice wipe. All right, so earlier I said that I would show you my trick to flavor the mayo. I was worried that it was gonna split and that I wasn't gonna have time, but turns out we have time. So you all know probably that my favorite herb is basil, hands down. So I'm gonna turn my garlic mayo into a basil mayo. At this point, you could add caramelized onion, you could add your favorite herb, you could add lemon zest or lime zest, but I'm just gonna add a little handful of fresh basil that I picked this morning from my basil plant, and I'm gonna make some green mayo. Now we have a garlic and basil infused mayo that is ready to dip your fries in, eat in a sandwich or on a wrap. Look at that color, look at that deliciousness, and look at that thickness. Get that in the sink and put my lid on my mayo. This is gonna go in the fridge. This has to stay refrigerated, and it is probably good for up to 2 weeks. And you wanna know why it lasts so long compared to regular mayo? Because there's no raw eggs in it. It's just chickpea liquid. How cool is that? All right, so our next thing to show you is the date sauce. The date sauce is something that I love to eat on ice cream or dip fruit in it or Really eat it with a spoon with a big sprinkle of salt. Yummy, yummy. All right, how do we open this? Like that. All right, I have my dates that we're soaking here. I'm just gonna get as much water out as I possibly can. It's a little bit hot, but I'm a chef and I can't feel it anymore. So I've got my warm, soft dates here. And to that, I'm adding a tiny little bit of vanilla. I don't need to add any sweetener because the dates are the sweetener. If you don't have vanilla, you could leave that out, of course. And then coconut. So this looks like my coconut yogurt, but it's not. It's just coconut cream, which is the ingredient that I use to make my coconut yogurt, but it's not yogurt, it's just cream. I have about 1.5 cups of dates here, I think, and I'm adding about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of coconut cream. I want to get a nice consistency. All right, let's turn this guy back on. See if I can figure it out. Yes. Look at that. Get my jar ready. And a spoon. All right, let's check the consistency. It looks like a thick, yummy paste. Let's get this off. Get this into my jar. So the barbecue sauce, the Beetchup, and this date sauce could all be canned and could all be preserved and held in your cold storage, and you can make big batches of it for next time. But the mayo and the salad dressing can't. So those two things have to go in the refrigerator and have to be eaten within the first couple weeks of making them. Whereas the Beetchup, the barbecue sauce, and the date sauce could be preserved and you could eat it at a later date. The date sauce, I don't typically do that. I actually freeze it. And I have to give this a taste. And I don't even have a knife to cut my apple. So let's just pretend I have an apple. I have some sprinkled nuts here that I'm gonna try this date sauce with. Oh my goodness. It tastes like creme caramel. No one would ever know this is dairy-free and that it wasn't packed full of processed sugar. It tastes like a gourmet caramel sauce. Delicious and so simple. See you next time.